Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Two senior Ukrainian ministers have been dismissed in what President Zelenskyy calls a renewed crackdown on corruption. A move that comes as the country battles not only on the front line, but also for credibility with its allies. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic stage, the UN is once again in focus with reports that the White House is seeking to soften language condemning Russia's occupation, drawing concern from Kyiv and its European partners. And on the battlefield, fog and fierce fighting are shaping the struggle for Pokrovsk, where Russian troops are pushing deeper into the city. Joining us now to discuss it further is Andreas Umland, analyst, Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies. Good to have you again, Andreas.
Thanks for having me again, Sasha.
Andreas, let's begin with Ukraine and these shocking dismissals, the whole corruption scandal that's still unfolding here. Looking what's happened already in these last 24 hours with the sacking of these ministers, is that enough in all of this? Trust has been really damaged here within Ukraine and by its partners. Does Zelenskyy need to do more here, or is this enough for the time being?
This is probably the biggest political crisis of Zelenskyy since he went into office in 2019. The problem here being that this scandal concerns his close business partners and friends who are friends of Zelenskyy's family and who have used their friendship with Zelenskyy to enrich themselves. There are no reports that Zelenskyy himself has enriched himself, but the friends of him did so apparently, and so that is really something very critical now for Zelenskyy, and he will have to make sure that Ukrainian society gets the impression that he is serious about preventing this sort of use of his office, of Zelensky's office, for enriching themselves.
Mm-hmm. As you said, there are connections, very close connections to the president's own circle. This is not the first time, and corruption has always been one of those things that has been seen as one of these big stumbling blocks for Ukraine. Reform has been talked about. Apparently, it's going on. But at the same time, we have this current scandal as we have it. The European Union, with its enlargement report, recently said everything is actually very, very good. So, where do we go from here? What's next? What tangible things could happen next in terms of reform? How can Zelenskyy win back the trust of his people and his allies?
One has to say that this form of corruption, the so-called откаты, the kickbacks, that is that companies have to pay kickbacks money to certain middlemen who then get them contracts with the state, is a very common practice of corruption in the post-Soviet space. Most businessmen, let's say from Western Europe, who have been active in the post-Soviet space, have probably encountered these sort of demands for kickbacks so that their contracts being signed. So this is something very common. And here what we have is, in fact, I would say, an encouraging development in that such a scheme has been now discovered and disclosed and is now scandalized, although it is linked to Zelenskyy's friends. And we can only suspect that in many other post-Soviet countries, there are similar schemes, actually, that are not being disclosed if they are so close to the head of state and head of government. So what we have here now is a scandal, but I would say a very useful scandal, and in a way that can be also a crisis that then opens the way for a new cleaning, so to say, of the Ukrainian state from these corrupt schemes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this is, as you said, something that we're discovering more of, but it's been really a shock for these last 24 hours, and we'll have more on it as we get more information. I also want to now switch a bit. Another, let's say, trouble spot for Ukraine itself. If we go over now to the United Nations, apparently the Trump administration is pushing to remove the phrasing of territorial integrity and aggression from a UN resolution on Ukraine. First of all, what message does that send? I mean, this is certainly worrying. How is this going to be interpreted by other member states? What's your take on it?
That would be indeed worrying and in contradiction to the whole spirit of the United Nations as it was established in 1945. The preservation of the territorial integrity and national sovereignty of the member countries of the United Nations is its first obligation. So that is indeed then a worrying sign, and it's no surprise, unfortunately, in view of the entire rhetoric of the Trump administration since January this year. I hope this is perhaps overblown, or perhaps not fully then true of what we will see at the end. But such formulations, they should be clearly naming the problem and the aggressor and the victim here, and there should be no ambivalence in these formulations, because that's what the United Nations are about.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, we actually spoke to Germany's former Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock here at TVP World just yesterday about all this, and let's just get her take and roll that clip now for you and our audience about what she thinks about this.
The UN is a guarantor for peace and security, and especially the Security Council, which has a responsibility to ensure peace and security around the world. And if the Security Council is not capable, for example, in this case, because of the veto, then it's the General Assembly which has to stand up, and the General Assembly has stood up by majority in the last years, and I'm expecting that the General Assembly is again making very clear that every country in the world, including Ukraine, has a right to its own territory, and nobody is allowed to invade, so the war has to end.
Right, so just briefly, your take on what Ms. Baerbock said there about the General Assembly having to stand up. So do you think that's going to happen?
One hopes so, and one hopes that the countries that are maybe far away from Eastern Europe and maybe are not that interested in the conflict itself see their own self-interest in this in such a resolution, because that is also about then the territorial integrity and national sovereignty of all other countries in the world. If Ukraine, a UN member, is sort of reduced in its statehood and becoming victim of an annexation, not just of an invasion, but of an annexation, where it loses territory by another member of the United Nations and even a member of the Security Council, that would be a precedent that then threatens all other countries of the world as well, because they may as well become victims of annexations by neighboring state. So one hopes that the signal here that will be coming out of the UN National Assembly will be unambiguous.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll see how that is. But I mean, as you said, it is worrying, and also curious that it's coming from the White House that has not been, let's say, on the best of terms with the United Nations recently. But we'll see how that actually impacts the Assembly itself. Speaking also of this can't help if we now go directly to Ukraine, to the encircled town, or rather city of Pokrovsk. I mean, we've heard reports in the last sort of 24 hours. There's fog. Russian forces apparently moving further to claim more of the city. I mean, it's not looking very good for the Ukrainians at all. I mean, encirclement, supply issues. What do you make of it if this city does fall? What will that do to Ukraine's war effort at the moment?
As far as I understand, what we're talking here are about a few kilometers back and forth, and something that is in view of the size of Ukraine, not so important. For me, the question still open is whether we are talking here about Pokrovsk as a symbolic city, so to say, or whether it's really as a physical place is so important for this war. And here the opinions of the military analysts and the generals and so on are not quite clear to me, frankly, so far, whether the loss of this small city, of which probably very few people had heard before this war, is that important. There is a worry here that the fall of Pokrovsk would then open the space for the Russian army to push further into the center of Ukraine, and this is really a strategic point. But I wonder how far this really will work under the current conditions, because we have a completely new way of warfare with these death zones, not a clear front line, with the enormous role that drones are playing in this war. And for me, it's still unclear whether the fall of Pokrovsk will be really that important for the entire war.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, as you said, it may be symbolic, that may be the case, but also strategic for many, also analysts we've spoken to. And I think at this point, every inch and every centimeter that Russia takes, I mean, obviously that's the wrong direction. If we're looking back at Avdiivka, if we're looking back at Bakhmut, so even if it's a smaller place, the strategic significance shouldn't be, let's say, dismissed. But unfortunately, it looks like the Russians seem to be having the upper hand at the moment. Look, we'll close it there. We covered a lot of ground today. Really appreciate it. Always a pleasure. Andreas Umland there. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us, but stay tuned. There's much more coming up right here on TVP World, so don't go away. Goodbye.